Hi, it's Carol Robertson, PhD here from Brain Art and Brain Sculpture and from Psychosensory Academy. And we're going to look at this case and we're going to think about the difference a question can make. We're going to be looking at educational approaches and we're going to be looking at psychosensory approaches. So, a 12-year-old girl has attended traditional therapy sessions. The parents wanted her to have some therapy because she was withdrawn and not eating. So what happened was the therapist used an approach, it's a common approach of exploring a desired outcome. You know, what did she wish for? And she was asked, what would you like to have happen? And she answered that the new girl was dead, squished on the road. Why did she answer this way? So let's consider that she has existing receptors. We've got the image there of her, and we've got a couple of neurons there engaging, and we can imagine those receptors with the traffic engaging with them, with that neural traffic engaging with them in the gap in the synapse. And of course the receptors would be it's a graphic, but the receptors would both be the same way round. So people experience times in their lives when they're focused on problems and risks. These generally relate to actual or perceived loss of something of value, being abandoned or abandoning something, or a sense of being trapped or stuck in some way. Something seems inescapable at this point, and any questions will be viewed from this perspective. So, if a therapist asks about a safe place, or loving, or being loved, or being free, it's very likely to activate the amygdala-based receptors, which are involved in concerns about loss of these. And this is what happened when the therapist asked her, what do you want to have happen? And we're going to see that unfold in this case. We're going to learn more about it, and we're going to be able to work out why this happened, and we will return to looking at that later. So thanks here to Dr. Ronald Rudin, the Havening Techniques, for some of these, and bringing together some of these brilliant checklists, these ideas. So there she is with her cortisol and adrenaline. After the sessions, what happened was the presenting issues worsened. So, and this led to, what she said led to her being withdrawn from the school due to the team of therapists' concerns that she might harm others. Her parents share that she's now angry, she's withdrawn, she's not eating, and she's not speaking. And they're very concerned about this idea that she might be somebody who might harm others or self-harm. It's not something they ever imagined could happen. And she just seems to be going out walking on her own. They live in the countryside. So they make a change and they move to a modern educational approach, and they contact a psychosensory practitioner. Psychosensory processes, such as the Havening techniques, will enable the brain to make neurological changes, and the person's perceptions will then change. Havening talks about this being a safe haven, these new responses. Because they are no longer responding to the situation as if it's threatening, the person will have a softer, more heartfelt perspective. A modern educational approach is an ideal way to share this information. The parents have shared that their daughter is angry, withdrawn, and not eating or speaking. The therapists and the school are concerned that she may harm others. The psychosensory practitioner asks the parents and the therapists, what does the girl enjoy? What does their daughter enjoy? What are her strengths and her passions? and neither group in this case can share any information about this. Havening practitioners consider both the presenting issues and the landscape. Landscape is a term used by Haveners to describe how the person's brain and body are structured and how they are functioning at this time. By discovering the girl's key landscape shapers, the practitioner will build a balanced view and some insights into her responses. So, a modern educational approach, brain art and brain sculpture. This system is designed to make learning these new neurobiology-based ideas and methods safer, feeling easier and more fun. The educational approach takes working memory capacity into consideration. So we can only hold on to a few things in working memory. So there's an argument between whether it's 4 or 7. So it's not a great deal. For example, this is achieved by naming them. So by naming the information related to how our brain is functioning at any moment in time, and how our body responds to this, and how we make sense of this electrical and chemical activity as brain art. So brain art therefore encompasses our thoughts. So these may be accessed as a kind of knowing or recognising. I don't know if I can take these back, I can. These may be accessed as a kind of knowing or recognising, or in the form of images or sounds. So the images might be very real seeming, or they might be very fleeting, or there might be lots of them, or they might be in the form of a movie, or they might be quite far away, they might be black and white, they can be folded up, all sorts of things. They can be very realistic, or they can be quite kind of surreal, they can be layered, they can be in front of us, behind us, all sorts of things. Sounds may be self-talk, dialogues, narrations, language loops, or music. Sensations, that's our somatic or somatosensory system in our brain. These may be described using metaphor. People talk about being heavy or light, or sunny or dark. And so when somebody uses a metaphor like that, that metaphor can be focused on, and it may be observed as having weight, texture, colour, temperature, and movement. And then there's what we might call the felt sense, and that describes quite well how we experience the autonomic system. So there are 3 parts to the autonomic system. There's the sympathetic system, parasympathetic system, and enteric system. So the sympathetic system we commonly call fight and flight, and the parasympathetic system we think of as being rest and digest, and the enteric system you could think about our guts for that. People talk about a gut feeling, or that their guts are affected by certain things. And so these may be noticed, described as tightness or softness in the body, as arousal, heart rate, breathing. So people might say, my heart is beating fast, or my heart seems slow, or I'm breathing really slowly in a quality way, or I'm breathing really fast, really breathless, or I can't breathe. A sense of being in the flow, or being blocked or stiff. And motivated, going towards something, or repelled, finding something aversive, or even we might be offered something that might seem like a gift, but we might actually rock back from that. And then there's signalling. So what are we signalling? We're signalling to ourselves, and we're signalling to others around us. We might be signalling that we're friendly, that we're caring, or we're seeking care. We might be signalling for attention or aid. We might be showing calming signals, or we might be showing survival signals. And then the other thing to take on board as well is our immune system, the state of our immune system. And so all of that massive amount of information we can define as brain art. So we can talk about brain art and it can mean all these different things. And so for different people and for different subjects, their brain art may be focused on sensations or on thoughts or on noticing their body goes tight or loose and relaxed or signalling, or they may be frequently run down or ill or healthy for long periods. So, a modern educational approach. So the brain art and brain sculpture practitioner will aim to share some essential information with the client. The client can then use this information to make sense of their experiences. To optimize this type of learning, it's ideal for the client to be generating goods. In Dutch, it's an acronym here, but in Dutch, goods means well, so it's quite a fun word for us. So goods is an acronym that saves us having to repeat the following, which is we're interested in GABA, glutamate, oxytocin, endorphins, dopamine, and serotonin. So it's easier to say goods. And they're, we really want to have a brain art relating to goods when we're learning something. So it's essential information that we respond to sensory input, that's cues. It's really helpful when we start to notice that, especially when we're seeking solutions. So what are these cues? They can be sounds, scents, tastes, textures, movements, temperature, weight, positions, and what we see or what we imagine. And it's interesting, I've made these all black and white. But as you look at them, I'm sure you can imagine a colour for each of those things. So that sort of snowy, frosty symbol, I'm sure you probably think the same as me, that it should be a kind of icy cold blue colour. The dragon, what would it be? Red or gold? Maybe green. The flag, the finishing flag, is black and white. The flames, the sun, red and yellow. The bread, the cherries. So we know a lot about sensory input because we've experienced it and we've made receptors, we've learned. So another essential piece of information is that we respond, that's our brain art, to cues. So we have a cue, let's say the cue is the sunshine. So the cue generates brain activity, and that brain activity, most of us like the sun, not all of us. So if the person likes the sun, then they're going to make goods, they're going to make GABA, oxytocin, endorphins, dopamine, serotonin. They're going to experience some thoughts, some sensations, felt sense, some signals or signalling, and their immune system will also make alterations. Now they may only notice their thoughts, or they may only notice the sensation of the sun on their skin, or they may only notice their body relaxing, or they may only notice that they don't want anybody to come close, or that they do, they're signalling that they're friendly. It's also really important to learn that our brain art can be a cue. So let's think of what that can be. So our brain art thoughts can cue the brain activity, which makes more brain art. So let's say they were thinking, oh, I just love this sunshine, it's beautiful. Then they would make brain art about that and extend on that, and they would make goods, and they would have another thought of thoughts, sensations, felt sense, signals, and immune. If they focused in on the sensations, perhaps they thought, oh, I'm getting a bit hot, I need some tan oil or something, or I need to go for a drink, then it's going to be a bit of different brain activity and different brain art. And again, will that brain art cue the next thing? Of course, then there's sensory input coming in as well. So you can imagine how this works. So we're always responding to cues and we're always making brain art. There we go. So we're imagining all of those as being pleasant, rewarding cues, and they're all making goods. It's all great, because that's what we're really interested in, because we want to the person wants to learn at this stage. We want to share information. It's also really important to know how we're learning all the time, and that's neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is about long-term potentiation of receptors and the encoding of information, all the sensory information in all our brain art, and also what's called long-term depression, which is about the absorbing of receptors. And we do this all the time. It's happening all the time. It's also important to know about how our brains use this information to predict and how that alters what we perceive. So if we've had a nice time in the sun before, we'll predict that it's going to be nice again, and it's more likely that we perceive it that way because we predicted it that way. So we will be looking for the nice things, and our focus will be on those nice things. So we also consider how we respond, so how we make brain art to cues. Are the cues, how do we sort them? Are they rewarding or are they risky? And we've got a V scale down there that's about risky and rewarding. How do we communicate with our brains? Our poor brain's in the dark. And what different areas of our brain respond to? So some parts of the brain are quite specialist in what they respond to. How our brain responds to loss, abandonment, inescapability, and other unconditional threat stimuli. And how our brain responds when we have a sense of safety and when we feel free. And then, very importantly, we start thinking about how can we shape our brain deliberately. This is a very modern idea. So we can think of this as brain sculpture. And we would do brain art deliberately so that we experience different responses. Brain art. And that's, you can do brain sculpture so that your responses change in the future. And then you have a new place to start building and learning from. So there's that brain activity, there's the action potentials going across there. And so we can think of all of this information as brain sculpture. And that makes it very simple to talk about. Because it's very specialist. We could talk all about how the receptors are engaged with and how we make action potentials and how we block receptors, and some receptors are open and all sorts of things are happening, all sorts of traffic's happening. But we can just call it brain sculpture, and we know what we're talking about. So all of this, neuroplasticity, deliberate changing, brain sculpture. We can also think about how we can use psychosensory processes, such as the havening techniques, to do brain sculpture. So through using psychosensory processes to do brain sculpture, the brain art will change. Our responses will change to cues. Okay. So, how can we prepare for success? So there are a few ideal skills for the client to get fantastic results and use the psychosensory processes easily and comfortably. It's going to really benefit them if they're able to respond to a cue and recall a learning experience that happened in a moment. It's really beneficial if they can focus on this one experience. It might be a few seconds, it might be a minute. It's really helpful if they can question what response they observe. So they're observing their brain art. That they can calibrate their observations. And so by calibrate is a great word. So calibrate just means to kind of measure it. So if we access an image of something that we love, is it a big image? Is it clear? Is it focused? And how powerful It's the feeling that goes along with it. You know, are we really bored by it? Or are we really like, oh, that's great. Yeah, I love that. So if we're like, that's great, I love that, then that's a very powerful, it's a powerful brain art. It's a powerful response. It's beneficial that they can track their observations. So can they keep track of something, one thing, and notice, then they can notice that it's changed. So utilising their information, that applies to the same, doesn't it? It enables us to notice if the psychosensory process, what has occurred because of it. So it's really beneficial that they can utilise their information. And then it's very useful that they can communicate about the information without moving into a narrative, because a narrative is going to actually activate other receptors, which we made later on when we told a story about it. So it's much more that we want to recall a learning experience that happened in the moment and see what we saw and hear what we heard and feel what we felt and remember all of that. All of the private information from that moment when we made those receptors, rather than the story we built about it in the years afterwards. So let's look at that. So it's questioning, observing, calibrating, tracking, and utilising. And that's a lot to say all the time. So what we say, to make it quick, is that we quok to, because we're going to be quok toing a lot. It's also useful to be able to imagine from a cue. So that top one can be recalling or imagining when we're working with these psychosensory processes like the Havening techniques. Okay, so utilising these existing receptors. So the first stage for the practitioner is to help the client use ideal brain art for sharing about themselves and learning modern ideas and techniques such as quok-to, brain art and Havening touch. The practitioner is going to avoid activating cortisol and adrenaline, these are survival responses, or overloading their working memory. And they're going to do this by using cues wisely, and observing, quok-toing, and introducing concepts using fun and consistent terms and easy language too, kind of amusing language. So understanding our neurobiology can help us cue the ideal brain art. We know that the individual will have many rewarding learning experiences, generated goods, GABA, oxytocin, endorphins, dopamine and serotonin, and made, potentiated, many receptors which can be activated by cueing. So in this case, the cue is thinking about the scone, it's recalling the scone, that activates the brain, and the resulting brain art is goods. It's, so her saliva's activated, she's, it's lovely and yummy. She start to get, even her stomach will start to get ready for the nice scone and tea. So we absolutely respond to cues. There we go, bit of blue flashing electricity for that brain. And goods, of course. So cueing is used in all the Havening processes, so it's beneficial to be good at cueing. In an educational approach, the practitioner will aim to identify cues that will result in the person generating brain art, which is goods. Some cues that generate other brain art, so cortisol and adrenaline, will also be identified in the process. This helps the practitioner learn about the girl's landscape shapers, and the practitioner can make a mental note of these cues and responses. So it's a cue, brain activity, brain art. When the sensory information, that's the cue, is matched, receptors in the brain are activated, neural traffic flows, and the person experiences the response, the brain art. How powerful this experience is will depend on the receptors activated and actually the action potentials as well, how much excitation there is, and using the frame of extending their knowledge so they can test the psychosensory process in a fun way. The favourites game. It's perfect for this, it can be ideal for this. electrical activity. So, utilising existing receptors. So with this girl, the practitioner modified the favourites game list and added the word yellow because they noted that the girl wore a yellow coat and she may have chosen freedom and safety because she liked the yellow coat. She might not have done. Her mother may have chosen the coat, and she may not have liked it. So by cueing the word yellow, they find out about whether she likes the yellow or not. The practitioner is keen to cue as many receptors that the girl has made when she's enjoyed a moment, such as being cuddled up in bed, or choosing a comfy seat, or savouring a warm drink and a sweet treat, or perhaps when she got a joke and giggled at a cartoon, a comedian, a movie, or a TikTok video, or the time she learned something, achieved something, and felt satisfied. And that can be as simple as caring for a pet, learning to cycle, playing digital games, or making a cup of tea. The practitioner used between 100 and 200 cues and observed as the girl responded. To make it easier to engage with the girl rather than writing notes, they used Quok2, questions, observing, calibrating, tracking, and utilising, in conjunction with the rewarding or risky V scale, and they used that in their mind's eye. So here's an example of a favourites game question. So we would preface it by saying to you, and you can do this now, it's just a favourite for now. You may choose a different favourite tomorrow. So what favourite would you choose out of these? What's your favourite scent at the moment? Scones, the smell of a wet dog, perfume, rainy days, lemons, cut lemons, tar and hot sunny days, Earl Grey tea, a struck match, being at the seaside, brand new cars inside, candles when you put them out, the house, your home, your sister, granny's face powder, yellow flowers, bubble bath, baby's hair, curry, old books, maybe in a bookshop or close up, fresh cut grass, or the moorland. What one would you choose out of all of those? And what ones did you, as you listened to me doing that, which ones did you make really strong, powerful brain art to? And which ones did you not? And which ones were you neutral about? Which ones do you think anybody watching you would see you respond to? So the favourite game is available from Brain Art and Brain Sculpture. And you can modify the favourite game. So this is just one question, which is sense, but there's also similar questions for what we see, what we hear, textures, and so on, all to do with sensory input, all to do with cues. So there was 200 cues used, but in a fun way, yeah? And it means all sorts of cues can be used that you probably wouldn't be able to weave into normal conversation. So it's a brilliant way to use a lot of cues in a few minutes. So you can do it in minutes. So out of all of those cues, here are the ones that generated a response that was of, a notable, easy to see response. So let's see what there was. Hang on. So in this case, what we're doing here is we're using the cues. You can see up the top I've lit it up. We're observing and we're calibrating. So we're asking the question, what's your favourite smell, which we went through. And then we observed the results. And these are the ones where, from all of the questions, these are the results. I keep doing that, it's the wrong thing. Okay. So, and now we're tracking. So you listen to everything and you're just making a mental note of where you're seeing responses. And you can use this V scale in your head, in your mind's eye, just to kind of do rough sorting. So what did we see? We saw this group here were mainly things that she really liked. So she really liked tea and scones and old flowery china and picking heather and dancing and lightweight yellow coat, the sky, drawing. And she really liked mum and dad, the school, but it was less strong and there seemed to be some confusion around it. So in your head, with your V scale in your head, you would be placing the things that were very strong further up the V scale. That was tea and scones and old flowery china. Very strong response, very powerful response. Mum and dad and school were kind of bit confusion or something there. So they're kind of in the middle of the V scale. They're in the kind of don't know, but I know I love them thing. Then the things that were neutral were numbers, memory games and humming. And that's great for us as havening practitioners because we can utilise, we know that it's going to be okay to utilise those in our working memory activities when we're doing displacement in event havening. Then up here, really powerful response, a move away response, a calming signal, a paling of our skin, a blush, were these things. So dog, best friend, new girl, sister and goats. Now she's smiling because we've queued, the practitioner has queued lots and lots. We've done 200 cues and they've mostly been aimed at being things that cue goods, yeah? And any time the practitioner has activated something like, so they say dog, you would expect maybe a big smile or whatever, but no, it went pure white and rocked back. So that's obviously risky, it's on the other side of the V scale. So you just move off that. Practitioner just moves off that. Now is not the time for that. The aim of now is to get lots of goods going so that there's a really good learning experience, so that the session, the first learning about the session is that it's fun and it's safe and it's okay to do havening, and the havening becomes something, doing brain sculpture and brain art becomes something that you use all the time in your everyday life. So that's just saying, you would skip on from that. So what does that look like if we do that? So it's really helpful because we're going to get goods, we're going to get that she remembers. So she's probably forgotten about all the things that she likes because she's been having such an upsetting time and she's missing going to school and she's upset that her mum and dad are upset and she's confused. These ones in this pink box, they're all from experiences that we can think of as being elves. So they're from a moment in time, an event, where her L is for landscape, how she was, so kind of that's the person, and it's a moment in time when the person felt free and safe. Now that's not something that we want to say to the client because we explained that earlier on. So instead of that we use cueing. But as a practitioner we know that neurologically these are probably encoded in the amygdala as rewarding, pleasurable experiences. So there will be receptors there. The receptors about the dog and the best friend are linked to Emily, which are EMLI. So that's times in moments in time where the meaning has been loss or abandonment or abandoning. So loss of something of value, or fear of something, of loss of losing something of value, and landscape, that's how they are, and I stands for inescapable. So if you're a havening practitioner watching this, you'll be very familiar with Emily, and these ones in the red would be relating to receptors made during Emily. So receptors that were potentiated and the information was all bound together during Emily. There we go, Emily. So these blue ones, the numbers, the memory games and humming, they'd be really good for working memory activities and we can use them in event havening. So here we're really thinking about landscape and landscape shapers. We're learning about the person, we're building a relationship and trust, but it's also learning is going on that this is good fun. So as you can see, we do not focus on these, we make a mental note of them, and even we don't focus on that, where there's confusion. We just stick to this part here. So we stick to where we get the goods, we stick to cueing, recalling of all of these times of picking heather and dancing and old flowery china and tea and scones and the sky and drawing and having fun. And she's smiling and she's taking her hood down. She's breathing differently. Her pupils look different, some colour in her face. So now we're just going to choose one. And we want to choose something that's pretty external and that's something that's happened many, many times and has got no link at all to any receptors which would cause distress of any kind. So it's got to generate goods, and it's got to generate goods consistently. Here we go. We're going to pick the tea and scones. That's our choice. She agrees. We're definitely going to pick tea and scones, and we know that that's going to action potentials and lots of neural activity, lots of activity in that synapse and passing it on through the body with the action potentials. So she remembers, she's remembering elves really, and it's generating lots of goods. So we're going to utilise now, so we're going to cue existing receptors. Now we've got an idea of what receptors there might be and what cues she responds to. So let's see what we've got. This is a different V scale. This is a V scale that we use when we're actually doing brain sculpture. So, and when we're looking at brain art. So this has got powerful responses at the top, yeah? On both sides, exact same, powerful, powerful. There we go. So the cue is imagining sitting in the chair at her grandmother's and eating funky scones. It's quite a long cue, isn't it? There's lots of cues within that. The brain art that she accesses is that she's sitting in the big leather chair with a scone and tea. The format is like a still picture, a painting of herself perhaps. It's coloured and it's dreamlike. Here we go. It's in the air in front of her, some 6 feet away. There's no frame and the image is equally focused on all the items. Now in this we've made a graphic of it because later on she described things, but at the time you can see that we don't really have so much content. And we don't have even about the complex content. She just tells us about the format. It's a still picture, it's kind of like a painting, it's coloured, it's dreamlike, it's in the air, there's no frame, and the image is equally focused on all items. She says she's aware that she's smiling and it feels nice. She doesn't have a name for the feeling. She can't name it, but she knows it very well. So it's that kind of, it's brain art, isn't it? It's the whole thing. And again, we know that there's neural traffic going to be happening here. And she chooses, see where she chooses to put it. So our first experience of using the V scale and our first experience of using brain art is about something that feels wonderful. And it's something that she's done many, many, many times before. So there are lots and lots and lots of receptors. It's not a one-off. We wouldn't want to work with a one-off. We just work with something that's a little moment in time that she's done many, 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 many times. And notice that she's imagining it. We're not asking her to recall. We're asking her to imagine. So it's a fictional, anything can happen. It's fictional and it's going to feel good. So now she's going to learn Havening Touch. So now she's got this goods going on and she's feeling great and she's enjoying herself and she's receiving praise for doing really well. We now do Havening Touch. So she's learning the 3 types of Havening Touch: palm havening, face havening, arm havening. And she's combining this with imagining sitting in the chair in her grandmother's home. And we can consider that now more traffic is going to flow between those neurons and more receptors are going to be involved. Big traffic. when she does the evening touch delta wave in her brain, she makes slow delta waves, and also C tactile fibres in the skin are activated. The skin is being moved by the Havening techniques, and that signals electrically to the brain. And it's also a working memory activity because it's new to her and she has to think about the direction. So the hippocampus will be activated as well. So she's going to continue using all three types of the Havening touch while imagining sitting comfortably in the chair in her grandmother's home. We can consider now that more receptors have been potentiated as learning takes place. Long-term potentiation, LTP, is taking place. So what happens at this stage is quite often the person doing it will jump between thinking about imagining the fun time where they took a little moment to themselves and they had a funky scone and a nice cup of tea in a big comfy chair, and thinking about the Havening touch and thinking about what they think about the Havening touch. So they're jumping between using two sets of receptors, if you like. So I've got there learning Havening touch. So last time we looked at, getting the brain arc going, and now we're looking at learning the Havening touch, and both are going on at the same time. Lots of things can go on our brain at once. So after about 4 minutes of doing this, of doing the Havening touch and imagining, she observes how much more she's accessing. She says, oh, it's like I can smell the food and feel the warm teacup and that fine china. The fine china is kind of cool, isn't it, at the top, and thin on your lip. The format has changed too. She says now it's like I'm looking at a close-up of a scone. It's also funny, have we got that scone? There is. It's also funny because my favourite flowers are in the cream. She says, I like thyme herb scones, heather flowers though. And she hears all of this as a warm internal dialogue, and she has a knowing that she's loved and loving. She giggles and says, this is fun. So now when we get these kind of surreal images when we access, where she's added the heather flowers, we have to consider what we were cueing. So we were cueing picking heather and heather flowers and herby scones and things like that. And so the brain puts those things together, and that's fine. And she's a kid, so she shares really honestly what she accesses, whereas sometimes adults will they'll edit what it is, but it can be kind of dreamlike, the brain up. So she's learning Havening touch and she's increasing long-term potential as she does, long-term potentiation as she does it, which is good because we want her to learn and we want her to use this again. So the practitioner asks her, what did she think about each type of Havening touch? Now this asking, so taking time and asking about the Havening touch enables LTP to take place because you're repeating and exploring it. We're not just whizzing on, we're taking our time. It doesn't take very long, it just takes minutes. It's quicker than me sharing it with you. She says it was interesting. So she's having to think about it and reflect on that experience. And then the practitioner, once she's finished thinking about it, the practitioner cues, and they might take a bit of time for each of these questions because the person might want to spend quite a lot of time answering them, and you can learn a lot of important things. So here I've made it kind of quick so that it's easy to, but more could be said. So was it easy to do? Was it comfortable to do? Would she do it again? So notice how these cues, how these questions are constructed, the questions, but look at the cues within them. Easy, comfortable. Will she do it again? Yes, 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 she says. So if we had a V scale with powerful responses in our head, that's where we have it. So the V scale's in our head and we're thinking, how's this going with the Havening touch? Well, it's great. First of all, she was like, yeah, that's interesting. That's kind of middling. In the middle of that scale, it's not that powerful. But then with the next three questions with those cues, she was like, yes, 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 I liked it, yes, Havening touch. So we know that action potentials, neural traffic, more receptors made, And there'll be some absorbing of receptors too. She might have started off thinking this is a bit funny, but then she started to like it, so she absorbed some receptors too. So learning about evening touch and brain art, did she notice that the brain art she accessed and observed became larger in some way? She's thoughtful and says, yes, after doing the evening touch, it was like I was inside myself, focused on the scone, and the image of the scone was really big and sort of close to me, sort of real seeming. So the practitioner asked, would you agree then that your brain art sort of amplified? And amplify means get larger. So yes, and my feelings got bigger and they amplified too. I feel all warm and sunny, and I think of being like a tree when I feel calm. So with this V scale, you could use a laminated paper V scale, or you could be working on Zoom and have the V scale as a screen share, and you can choose, if you work on pages, you can use some symbols, just some fast symbols that they can have as a marker, so, or text, so they can say at my granny's, you know, for the picture. We've put pictures here to give you a kind of graphic representation. When you do this yourself, you'll get an idea of how you experience things. So it might be more that you feel it in your body, and how might you do a marker for that. This is to show you, you know, a graphic representation of it. So then you say, so this is a segue. So segues are really important. They're really, really important, and you want to think really carefully about your segues. So here's a seg. So, and the practitioner says, and would you say that's good or useful to know that you can do that? You know, that it can increase. She's thoughtful, and then she says yes. Excuse me. Then you say, you've learned about brain art, havening touch, and this amplified technique really well. You're naming what they've done so far. This helps with LTP. Take your time, name it, be clear, separate things out. Very well done. Now, there are other different havening techniques which can also be used to reduce unwanted brain art. Would you like to test that out or explore doing that? Yes, I would, she says. Do you have some unwanted brain art in mind? Yes, I do. A new girl came to school, and my friend, and her voice breaks. She says, I needed my friend. And she can't speak, and there are tears in her eyes. And then her voice breaks more, and she says, my heart broke. It is so sore. And she uses present tense. Her heart is sore now. She's activating receptors in her amygdala right now. We are at the start of event havening. So let's stop this video now, and we'll come back just as we start into that event havening.